coming up next. Stay tuned to learn more about student interest in blockchain technology. Reimagine 2020.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reimagine 2020. I'm your host, Adam, with a real applicable panel for you today. Appreciate all of you tuning in to listen to our guests. So very fortunate to have these individuals join me. Super excited to talk about what blockchain IoT applications have in store for us. And I said that intro line intentionally to emphasize the real applicable part of it, because this panel was designed that way to ideally give our audience and viewers insight into real use cases and applications from a couple interesting projects that I have here today. For the panel, our viewers are global, wide range of experience from beginners to middle of the pack, with a few experts. And to our audience out there, the overall arching goal of our conference was to bring you reality, understand how blockchains are being used together, siloed or even with other technologies, but also the various models that we'll get into shortly with a couple of these projects. We're trying to separate the noise from the facts for everybody to kind of get a grasp of this while everybody's at home. So my goal at the end of the discussion is to share, blockchain's future potential, and it's actually here. So without further ado, let me bring up the panel here, and we'll start off with Kyle. Give a quick intro, and we'll go around the room.
Sure, Adam. Thanks for having me, to you and the entire MouseBelt team. This is exciting, and happy to be here with Christian and Larry as well to share the stage. So I'm Kyle Ellicott. I'm co-founder of Topio Networks, where we focus a lot on the acceleration and formation of markets and development of companies around emerging technologies. And produce a lot of research and data and opinion pieces around that as well. So for me, I've been in technology for way too long than I'll admit on this panel. But for everyone else, I've been in IoT for almost 10 years and seen it from its very early days when it was just devices to wearables, to the Internet of Things, to the connected world, to the world we eat, live, and breathe today. And on the blockchain side, have been very involved actively researching and looking at companies from the venture side for the past 2 years, and looking at the infrastructure layer. So putting together taxonomies and really mapping out where this industry is, where people say it is, and where it's headed, both from an infrastructure level and now at an application layer. So looking at things like decentralized apps, to decentralized finance, to now identity, and all these areas that things are starting to be pulled from, to really the future of our applications as we know it. So that's a short bit about me. I'll pause there and let the rest answer it. So happy to be here.
Great. Larry, you want to take it?
Absolutely. Hey guys, my name is Larry Peng, head of business development at IoTeX. A little background about myself. I grew up in Los Angeles. Went to school on the East Coast at MIT and spent 5 years in consulting before joining IoTeX in 2018. Basically, IoTeX, at the core of what we do, we're a technology platform, a smart contract-based platform, but we really focus on delivering the capabilities that manufacturers and builders need to generate trusted devices and trusted data, off of which they can start to generate their own trusted applications and trusted services, right? So, we operate at multiple parts of the tech stack, all the way from the asset layer in the field, different sensors and gateways, to integrations to the IoT cloud or decentralized storage. And then finally, kind of using blockchain as the root of trust to issue identities, to manage automation and all the good things that we're familiar with. But I'm very glad to be joining this panel, and looking forward to sharing some perspectives on the overall blockchain and IoT market, along with Christian and Kyle.
Thank you. Christian, take it away.
Thanks a lot, Adam. Really glad to be here. My name is Christian Shearer. I'm the CEO at Regen Network. I've been wrapped up in ecological agriculture for the past 15 years. I would be willing to bet I have the least technology experience of this of the people on this panel. But what I've been trying to work on here is making sure that we have a planet for our grandkids. And what I've realized after being out in the field a lot is that there's a lot of data that's required around this. Data transparency, trust around data, verification of data, and building systems. And we come to blockchain solutions to be able to verify this data in a way that's trusted by all parties, and that then can issue cryptographic credits that represent the impact that's happening on the ground, allows us to implement financial solutions that can then turn on the world's land managers to be able to work towards the regeneration that this planet needs. So I would have never guessed that I'd be here, but now that I'm here, it's of the utmost importance.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for that. And, for our audience and viewers out there that are going to be watching this, I kind of want to set this up, set up the framework here for our discussion, for the next 45 minutes. And it's pretty straightforward. I want everybody to kind of understand, where you guys come from, which you kind of just gave a brief background, but more from the blockchain side. And so what that means is, what does blockchain mean to you? And I want to set this up so that when we get to your projects, it all makes sense for everybody. Because I think a lot of people are just learning about blockchain, or they think about cryptocurrency, or it's Bitcoin. But obviously this panel is a little beyond that, right? It's kind of, again, the use cases, the applications, making a difference in the world, and we can take it from there. So first question is, what is blockchain for each of you? And we'll start maybe with Christian. What does blockchain mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So our company needs solutions to be able to take a wide array of different data sources and be able to bring them together in such a way that they are collected, organized, put into a package that is able to be trusted by many different parties, potentially even parties that otherwise would have an adversarial relationship with them, right? So one of the key things that needs to happen here is a community-governed ledger of some kind, right? And as of right now in the world, that really doesn't exist in the world of environmental data, in the world of carbon credits, in the world of ecological offsets and things like that. And you can imagine when the US government just says, oh, just trust us. We have good methodologies, we have good data, just trust us. And people are like, I have a few reasons why I might not trust you. And then when you have scientists who say, we've got a lot of good data, and et cetera, and they're saying, just trust us. Well, it turns out that most scientists are paid by some large corporation, and oftentimes there's good reasons to not necessarily trust them either. So how is it that we can collect this data, organize this data, open source the code behind this, open source the scientific methodologies behind this, and then when there's the issuance of ecosystem services credits or carbon credits, it's very easy to click into that, basically using like a block explorer, for example, to find out where and when and how exactly this carbon credit was issued and who owns it and did they retire it or not. All of these are really, really important issues in the world of carbon credits, and blockchain does an excellent job of addressing these issues. So as a company, we looked at a whole bunch of different solutions, and we landed on the Tendermint consensus engine, ended up landing on the Cosmos SDK as the SDK that we wanted to move forward. Our team is now taking part in the development of the SDK to get it moving forward, while also creating a fork of the SDK and creating Regen Ledger for our domain-specific activities. That seems to be the perfect tool for us.
No, perfect. And I remember you mentioned that a few months ago when we met about developing on Tendermint. Going back to that data, which kind of brings to another use case of the data, the research, the scientific research. Blockchain actually has a place in that area as well, right? Kind of incentivizing good research and kind of getting all papers, read effectively and efficiently. So that's kind of another use case. You just touched on that, but very interesting stuff. Kyle.
Well, absolutely. Adam, just to feed off of that a little bit, there are so many scientists out there that do a PhD dissertation and they dive really deeply into something. It results in a paper that gets shoved on a shelf or into a file somewhere and nothing comes of it. And then they can't find a job that has anything to do with it. part of what we're aiming to do at Regen Network is we recognize that the world is a very context-specific place. Every single watershed, every single valley on this planet is unique, right? And if we're going to accurately measure positive impact on the planet, we need the participation of all these PhD students and their dissertations and areas of expertise. We also need the participation of citizen scientists, and all of us are carrying around a data collection device in our pockets, right? Our cell phones. There needs to be a way in which we can all contribute to an understanding of what's really happening, what's truth right now in a specific place. And I think that is through openness and transparency and bringing together these data sources.
Awesome.
So,
just like the community, just like the blockchain community in general. Kyle, what's your thoughts? What is blockchain to you? What does it mean? What is it?
Yeah, well, aside from a word I hear or use on a daily basis, I'll take a little bit different view than Christian. To me, this is future infrastructure. When I look at all of the technology I've had a hand in some way, shape, or form over the years, and even what's to come, blockchain is an infrastructure piece, and I'll explain what I mean in a minute. It is going to be key for the future of how we develop applications and how we develop technology, whether that's a software-based product or it's a hardware-based product. It doesn't matter. That is going to play a role at an infrastructural layer, and even again to our applications. And so, to Christian's point, being able to trust things, and not to steal Larry's potential thunder here, but pulling from my IoT background, one device talking to another device, who knows what those devices are sharing or not sharing, and who they may be sharing back to, right? So imagine two vehicles driving down a highway. One car passes another. They both have sensors in them and share data across, but they end up sharing the wrong data across because it's openly shared. And at the same time, they're driving on this highway where there's city data that's coming in, and there's human data that's coming in, and there's XYZ. What happens is you get this big mashup of data that doesn't mean anything, or it means a lot to their own individual respected parties, but now has been shared everywhere. And so there's no trust in knowing where the data came from, who the data was used or for, and why these two devices in this, or sensors in this example, were able to share certain points of data. And so blockchain to me is this infrastructure that starts to help and solve those problems. So for the future of our connected world, when we look at things like IoT and the bigger play of infrastructure and future of edge and connectivity, blockchain has a role in that. When you look at the next level of payments and finance, a big conversation we're talking about now in this current pandemic, blockchain again plays a role in that, being able to act as this new layer of infrastructure when it comes to distribution of storage or cloud services or computing services, to how records are transacted, how money and goods in the coming future will be transacted as well. So to me, this is an infrastructure, and this is an infrastructure for the future, not just as blockchain, but literally in all the technology that we're looking at going forward, similar to how we look at edge, similar to how we look at the artificial intelligence layer. This is going to play a very, very foundational role in anything that we build. For the most part, I'll asterisk that, as I'm sure some people will comment, but in the most part of everything that we do going forward.
Awesome. No, great insight. And I'll let kind of Larry take it from here, because I'm sure you have a lot to say. Well, Larry, what's blockchain to you, and, what does it mean?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we could take a step back and just talk about, how we got here today, right? Like the past 10, 20 years has really been around, using these Web 1.0 tools like TCP/IP, UDP, HTTP, these open protocols, right? And what we've seen is the Web 2.0 layer, which is mostly these proprietary, vertically integrated tech companies, Google, Amazon, Facebook, et cetera, have built trillion-dollar businesses on top of this open infrastructure. But there's a good saying I heard from a podcast that Google was able to build $1 trillion business on top of Web 1.0, but no one's going to be able to even build $1 billion business on top of Google, right? So that's where it stops, right? Web 2.0 is this proprietary layer, which, you know, has all the data from the users, all the incentives from the users. You know, these big tech companies are kind of the gatekeepers of trust on the internet now, right? Like they decide which service providers can service which devices, which partners can offer services to, you know, the AWS customers and such like that. So when I think of blockchain, I think about taking that very rigid Web 2.0 layer and cracking it open. And, you know, think about a little Mario box with all these coins flying out. They're all being distributed back to their rightful owners, which are the people, right? The people that own these devices, the people that generate their data. So that's one aspect of blockchain, I think, is reopening the ability for people to build on an infrastructure that's not closed and proprietary. I mean, I think the next important part of a blockchain that, you know, hasn't been mentioned yet is more around, you know, I think Kyle was mentioning things around edge computing, right? The truth is, you know, a lot of the computation and the processing of data is not going to be done in centralized servers anymore. They're going to be done on all these devices that you have in your homes, your camera, your TV, even your microwave, your refrigerator, your smart toilet in the future. All these things are going to be coordinating. And in a way, you know, blockchain is a great way to bring these devices together as an orchestration layer, right? You know, if you need to, you know, divvy up a task to multiple devices to reach a certain outcome, blockchain can make sure that task is done and done to the point where nothing else, you know, they're not overstepping their scope, right? Which is a huge problem with IoT devices today, especially the ones that we put in our homes, right? These are, you know, purchased, you know, Nest was purchased by Google, Ring was purchased by Amazon, Fitbit's owned by Google now. All of that data is going into that Web 2.0 layer. So, you know, I think blockchain really has the opportunity to orchestrate and distribute the wealth back to the people.
And if I can add on to that, so to Larry's point, for viewers out there, everything is siloed. It's in one box, as he mentioned. And, you know, the idea science fiction presented to us, and I think we all had in our minds, was this, you know, very connected world. Everything worked. Everything just magically happened. I mean, I envision a future where, you know, the word technology doesn't exist. Just things just happen for us, right? Mm-hmm. We don't have to think about that kind of stuff. That's the way it should be. And that's the way we thought it would be. And all of these pieces we're talking about have existed in some shape or form, but so siloed. I mean, just completely on their own, right? Distributed computing, scientists were using years ago, but now it's become a topic of conversation because it shouldn't be something we're hoping or thinking for. It should be just there. We should be there already, and bringing these things together. And, you know, the word we talked about before the show started was interoperable. You know, right now, the Googles, the Amazons, the Facebooks, the Apples, et cetera, they don't always necessarily work together. So while one device is connecting and collecting one thing, doesn't matter if it wants to share or if it should share, it doesn't share. And as Larry mentioned, we don't decide that as individuals, right? We don't decide how and what we do with our data. We don't decide how and what we do with our devices. And now blockchain actually brings that to the forefront and says, whoa, let's pump the brakes. Let's bring all this together in the way it should be, that we all expect it to be, like what Christian is working on as well.
Yeah, I mean, what that brings up for me, what's really enlivening there for me is that this is a social justice question that you're talking about here. You know, I'm focused on environment, it's environmental justice as well. So what you're talking about just isn't just convenience for all of us and helpfulness, but actually allows those of us in this world who often don't have access to the services that those of us living in the West have. And that's because siloed technology companies are very market focused and profit focused, and it doesn't make sense to expand the technology to market of people who can't pay a bunch of money for it, right? I think one of the things that blockchain technology is doing that's really, really beautiful and needed is saying this should be open, this should be shared. You own your own data. You know, participation across the board is encouraged and expected, not a, you know, play if you can pay type situation.
Sorry, and that's kind of my goal here and focus is, you know, for the viewers and audience, it's not just about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and it's more of, these projects and identifying, the future of opportunity. And so I'm sure everybody hears, again, the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency. Where are we in terms of blockchain kind of taking over that discussion from like DeFi to, as you mentioned, I believe in the infrastructure as well. I think obviously this is going to take over in the sense of, all these devices and robots and cars and that transfer of value to each other. For the audience, I think, can you give them maybe some insight? And all of you are pretty deep in this space. So maybe give them some insight aside from the currency aspect of people think of it taking over the dollar or something like that. It's not comprehensible because we're in America, but in, all over globally, blockchain is definitely a use case, and going into even adoption with enterprises, banks, obviously they're using the infrastructure. So Larry, maybe give our audience a little more depth on, what this future looks like, I guess, aside from the DeFi space, because there's so many applications and we could probably talk on for hours. But aside from that, maybe give them a little bit more insight into what IoT is doing and how you merged, together to do what you guys do.
Yeah, let me maybe explain, one practical use case of blockchain and one more theoretical one that I think is going to have a really big impact on the future, right? So, as far as the, how I see blockchain as far as, in the IoT space, I think the first thing to note is blockchain is not the silver bullet. It's not the panacea that's going to solve all of our problems, but it is a tool that, plays a critical part, or it's a critical layer in the overall tech stack. And it all goes back to, enabling trust in whatever you need to be trusted today, right? There's a lot of things out there today that have inherent trust, but in areas where technological trust is needed, a lot of the ways that we enforce trust today is through policies and regulations. You're starting to see this with GDPR and other kind of data privacy regulations, but really, using technology as a sure way to guarantee trust is, I think, really important, right? So, one use case that IoTeX is really excited to be working on is this concept called UCAM. So we worked with a large security camera manufacturer called Tenvis. They've been around since 2005, sold millions of cameras to government, to enterprise, to consumers, but they came to us looking to enhance their cameras with privacy for their users, right? So this is a very practical use case of blockchain, and it's an example of a trusted process that is maybe overlooked today and assumed to be trusted, but it's really not, right? And that is the concept of end-to-end encryption and owning your data, right? So we use blockchain in this case, not only as the login for the camera, but also as the mechanism to ensure, to mint the encryption keys and to make sure that the user is the only one with a copy of that key, right? And all the processing is done on the edge. So we don't need to even touch your data to deliver you the services that you want. This is a really big topic because Zoom actually about a month ago, right? They got caught lying about their definition of end-to-end encryption. So what they actually use is something called client to server, which means they have the keys to your data and they're going to unlock it and process all your data on the server. And it's a black box, right? You don't know what they're doing behind the scenes. Like GDPR is trying to do things to protect us and allow us more transparency into that black box. But headline after headline, our data is not being used for what we think it is, right? So that's a very practical case, right? We've launched this UCAM camera. It's on sale now. It's going to be hitting Amazon in the next one or 2 months. And, it's just a better camera. It has all the features you would expect, but it also delivers privacy and data ownership, right? But, not to take too much time, I want to jump into the next more theoretical use case of blockchain. And that is combining, if you think about what blockchain is, it's kind of like a tamper-proof backend system, right? But there's also the concept of tamper-proof hardware, which we already use every day. The chip in your credit card, that's a piece of what they call secure hardware, secure elements. The chip in your iPhone that manages your biometrics and your face IDs, that's a piece of secure hardware. For the crypto users, your Ledger wallet, it has a secure element in it. And basically this special chip basically guarantees the integrity and the confidentiality of all processes executed in that chip. In other words, it's tamper-proof hardware, right? When you apply tamper-proof hardware and tamper-proof backend together, it creates a very pure source of data, one that came from a trusted device and it hasn't been changed after the fact. which means you don't need an intermediary to come and settle disputes, right? It's globally trusted, globally verifiable. And that just opens the door for so many use cases, right? Imagine if you didn't need to take a pause at every step in the supply chain to reestablish trust. Everyone's working out the same data pool. And I'm sure, Christian has a lot of thoughts around this, around synchronization of research in the climate space. Would love to hear some thoughts around that, Christian.
Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of right where I was going to go with Adam's question here. The use case that we are primarily working on, and the reason I think that blockchain is most important for what it is that we're doing at Regen Network, has to do with valuing public goods, right? And what I mean by public goods is the air that we breathe and the water that's in the streams and the habitat for the frogs and the birds, and it's things that all of us appreciate, and not only appreciate, but actually absolutely have to survive. And yet market forces as they currently work don't really value those public goods, right? So how do we value public goods? From my perspective, in order to value something, you have to be able to do a couple things. One is be able to value that, verify that public good and the change in state of that public good to multiple stakeholders so that they can all agree that that's happening. And that's just what Larry's talking about, is data coming in such a way that it is robust and trusted, right? So that comes in and all the stakeholders can agree, okay, that's the data. It hasn't been tampered with, right? And then the second thing is we need to be able to quantify the value that's been generated there. And there's a number of ways that we have to do that using open science and other things so people understand the methodologies behind the quantification, right? These things, using a blockchain and a public governance on a blockchain, are very helpful to make this happen. And then, of course, creating agreements around these specific outcomes becomes a lot easier on a blockchain as well, where either you issue some sort of digital credit that represents the positive impact that's been created by one party that another party would then wants to purchase to offset their negative impact, or creating smart contracts that one party says, hey, if there is clean water in this location by this date, then this money will be released to this party. Blockchain is a perfect way of doing this at a very low cost and high verifiability. So
yeah, and to further on that, again, this is an infrastructure piece of technology. So when you hear it, for the audience, right, if you're hearing this all the time, few points. One, it's an infrastructure technology. So it's helping to power or helping to improve or helping to make things more efficient. So to Christian's point, smart contracts, right? Party A, party C wants to get B done. Easily, there is a digital contract. So just like we have legal paper agreements that states all the rules and the terms. And when the deal is complete, something is triggered, right? An event. So if Christian does, if I do a job for Christian, for instance, and the agreement is that when the job is complete, he pays me $100. Once the job is complete, that $100 is automatically sent to me. He doesn't necessarily have to do anything further. I don't have to do anything other than send him the website, for instance, in this case. Once it's live, that $100 is sent. He's happy. If there's anything further, we go back to another contract, for instance. So just in its most basic example, it makes things more efficient through the evolution of what the infrastructure stands for. Two, to Adam's original question, so cryptocurrencies, right? Tokens, things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, to be very blunt. So blockchain is not crypto and crypto is not blockchain. Again, blockchain is the infrastructure. Cryptocurrencies or digital currencies, things you might be hearing about now, like the digital dollar or the digital euro, these bigger governmental projects that are being talked about, these are use cases. They are powered with this technology, this infrastructure, to do what they do. So that's another thing to think about. And then even furthermore, where we are, this is the early days. So to separate, blockchain from DeFi, for instance, again, decentralized finance, this is a term that's talking about the future of finance, our open finance versus things that are very centralized and handled, kind of like what Christian was mentioning. It's either handled by Larry, it's all handled silotly. Now we want to make that a little bit more dispersed and more efficient again. So where we're at today is we're at the early days of this infrastructure, of this technology. I mean, realistically, if you break it down and look at the research, we've only been at this a couple years in terms of its adaptation for use. Okay, right? Again, people will argue me differently. Bitcoin was 10, 11 years ago. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about real adoption. It's only been a couple years that we're starting to see things tested, it applied, use cases like both Larry and Christian are mentioning. So we're in the early days of this. So when you're reading or hearing about, this didn't work, or this isn't as fast, or this got hacked, or that got hacked, realize it's very early days for some of this stuff. And DeFi is a good example to that. And I'll come back to another one which is gaming. Decentralized finance, we had a lot of situations in the past 6 months where applications have been hacked. In the past, that meant data was stolen. In this case, it was money. Whether it was digital or it was real, it was money. And that disappeared. What happened though, which is fascinating, and I hope everyone would agree with me, of all the industries and all the waves of technology, never have I seen a community or a group come together so fast and rapidly to figure out what a problem was and help to solve it and to create a path forward. And what that meant was finding the bug, fixing it, figuring out why it happened, and then creating hopefully a future process of putting in place audits and putting in place and control methods to hopefully not see that again. But again, early days, we're going to see those things break over and over and over again. And then you look at gaming. Gaming is a great use case where we've had digital goods, skins, tokens. Anyone that played World of Warcraft, I mean, you lived what is the digital goods economy today. 10 years ago, 20 years ago. We're now just amplifying that. We're taking it to the next level and creating anything that's physical and making it digital and bringing these, paper or real world economies into a more scalable or overreaching economy even further as well. So,
and
Yeah,
Christian,
just to piggyback.
go ahead, Larry. Go
I
ahead.
was just going to piggyback on that a little bit. I think what Christian and Kyle said are very inspiring. I think the way I see it, all the use cases in blockchain today, when you think about who the user is, right, is generally a person or it's an institution, right? Maybe these guys have identities. They can discover and be discovered. They can transfer value and information in a trusted way. But where we're headed is these users are now going to be devices, right? Devices will have their own identities. They will be able to have different goals because they're programmed with specific goals, and will interact with other devices to make that goal happen, right? And that's exactly where we're headed. If you think about all the different types of IoT devices, from Elon's Neuralink that's going to be embedded in your brain, to pacemakers, to a lot of health devices, right? Like all of these things are going to be kind of living organisms in a way, and they'll all have their own kind of identity and history. And without that, all you have is a bunch of ones and zeros, and not really being able to create this interoperability that we're talking about, not just between machines and machines, but between humans and machines in the sharing economy, and between businesses and businesses to do more like private multi-party analytics and more advanced use cases like that. So we're just on the cusp of evolving into that. Yeah,
and even on the consumer level, I mean, when you wake up in the morning, you put so much thought into the next 12 hours of your day, and you shouldn't have to in most cases, right? There's so many things we worry about that technology is here to solve that should already be solving. And to your point, when I wake up in the day, my calendar tells me what I'm going to do. There should be sensors and things that are connecting to that to make the rest of my day more efficient, right? So my calendar knows that I've got to be in the office at 8 a.m. My car comes to pick me up at 7:30 because it takes 30 minutes based on current conditions and traffic to get me to the office. And what I didn't know is when I was sleeping, that car was out making money for me. So during the time I was sleeping, I actually made $100. And I wake up and I'm on my way to the office. I arrive at the office right on time, and everything else, technology plays that seamless role. And while I'm there, maybe the car goes off and goes to get maintenance. I don't have to worry about that anymore. I don't have to worry about it. And to Christian's project, I'm getting reimbursed because I'm getting, carbon kickbacks is just an example to Christian. And from there, as I'm headed home, my refrigerator knows what I have or I don't, because these sensors are talking to each other. It can automatically send an order to, say, Instacart, who just, boom, sends me a delivery of apples because I'm out of apples. And I happen to save.
I'm happy or scared.
So that's it's kind of why I give that consumer example.
Yeah.
Because it's to Larry's, more institutional, I would say, or bigger example in a good way, is this is going to work on many different levels, and it's going to come in many different ways. You shouldn't be overwhelmed yet. And if anything, like I said in the beginning, my view, we lose the word technology in our future vocabulary. It all is just seamless. Wow. Right? Things work better for you. Things work more efficiently for you. Where things get scary, to everyone's points here, is what happens next, right? When this earpiece is talking to this earpiece, but I don't know what it's sharing in between, that's the worry. And blockchain has played a very big role in some of the pieces we've talked about to help minimize that. So when these devices are talking to each other, to Larry, we know hopefully, we know what they're sharing back and forth, right? When these applications are connecting with each other, we understand how to Christian's project, how we're able to, maybe profit off that, but also how we're doing something better or having a better impact as well.
And Christian, can you give our audience and viewers kind of a 30-second overview of what your project is? Because I want to get into how you guys started out with the potato. No, but give some insight into what you guys are doing.
Sure. He's mentioned the potato because I have a demo day video on YouTube where I start out with, "This is a potato," and it's a good place to start because we're all familiar with potatoes. In fact, we all engage with natural systems usually at least 3 times a day in the form of a meal. Right? You're eating some rice, or you're eating some wheat, or a potato, or tomato, whatever it is. Somebody grew that somewhere on the planet, and that place was impacted either positively or negatively through the growing of that potato. Right? So what Regen Network is doing is we're building a full stack open source development kit, including a domain-specific blockchain to power the many, many different applications that are needed in the space that relates to ecological data. And there are many, many applications for that. I mean, just what Kyle was talking about now, what I would see woven into that is every single thing that happened in his description, there is some sort of ecological accounting that happens behind that. When your car went and earned that $100, it, caused X amount of impact. Very small because it's an electric car, but still some impact. And so then it automatically buys ecological offsets for that negative impact they created, and it preserved a wetland down in Mexico somewhere that needed financing to be able to be rebuilt, right? And that all happened automatically while he was sleeping, right? I totally see that happen. What we've done recently, just to come back for a second, we're issuing our very first regenerative agriculture-backed carbon credit in the next month or so. The whole project is ready. The credit's all ready. We're just finalizing the legal and all that on the back end. I'm starting to make sales calls and getting this project in Australia is an 1,800 hectare rotational grazing project where the animals mimic the processes of natural grazing animals. You hear a lot about how cows are bad for the environment. Well, it's good for us to remember that there was 30 to 60 million buffalo in North America before the white man arrived. And as the Savory Institute says, it's not the cow, it's the how, right? So how are these animals being managed? And if they're managed in a way that's correct, it sequesters a huge amount of carbon, is much better for the animal. It creates biodiversity. It protects the waterways. It creates more nutritional food for humans. And so that's what we're interested in verifying. That's what we're interested in bringing to market and making sure that those farmers get paid for that positive impact. And then a company like Microsoft, which just recently committed to offsetting all of its carbon back to 1976, can work with that farmer to purchase the carbon that farmer has produced and support that farmer to expand their operations. In that way, we're going to make this world a better place and have a planet for our grandkids.
That's interesting. Another question I have is around blockchain technology itself.
Mm-hmm.
How's that coming about? There's a lot of work being done, right? There's so many layer ones and scaling solutions. How is the infrastructure panning out kind of with your vision? Is the blockchain on track with you? Are they a little behind? Or are they ahead? Are they where they need to be? And I'll kind of let maybe Larry answer that question, and then I'll go back to Christian on the blockchain tech. Where does that lie?
Yeah, what's interesting is, IoTeX, we have a philosophy that, at the core of what we do, we're infrastructure builders, right? But we operate at this tricky intersection of blockchain, IoT, and privacy. And we have a lot of tools that, to our community, sometimes they seem like standalone elements, but really they're part of the full stack solution that we envision, right? So going back to the UCAN product, right? This is not our one and done product, right? This is, our first product that we really want to show people using our infrastructure, using our tools, using our middleware. You can combine these things to create this revenue generating product that is not a novelty. It provides absolute privacy and the same features as you would in a different camera, right? So our experience taking that end to end with our partner Tenvis has really shown us, not only what the needs are on the application side, but also what the needs are on the infrastructure side, right? It's very cyclical. To know what type of infrastructure you need to build different types of applications. And once you hit the ceiling as far as what your applications can do, maybe it's time to re-up on your infrastructure, right? So these things really go hand in hand. And I think as a platform, we've really taken it upon ourselves to work closely with the application builders. And sometimes we build our own applications. Again, not to be the kind of the one and done. But to understand and put ourselves in our potential customers' shoes and see what they really need. So I think that's something for insight from IoTex's side.
Nice, Larry. I'd say from Regen Network side, we are working with the Cosmos community, and we couldn't be happier to be doing that. Cosmos is fairly young compared to some of the blockchains out there, and there's still a lot of development and work. IBC is the inter blockchain communication is just I don't know, a couple months out from being launched. The Regen Network development team was also instrumental in the development of WASM virtual machine, which has been a big step up for the Cosmos community. And then we are launching our native blockchain or ecological domain specific blockchain in August. And we're aiming to have the ecosystem services credit module live by that time, which will allow us to, in a very automated way, have an ecological methodology that when the data is input to that methodology and the output is that, yes, indeed, the requirements of the methodology have been produced, then a credit is produced that is basically like a carbon credit or a carbon plus credit with other co-benefits as well. Then that could be then traded by the various parties. That functionality is a basic amount of functionality that will help our registry, our carbon registry, get ahead immediately from the status quo. Now, that being said, there's all sorts of exciting functionality coming behind that's going to take this way farther. Integration with IoT, all the DeFi stuff, bringing really creative financing mechanisms into the space is absolutely necessary to grow this from a multi-billion-dollar industry to a multi-trillion-dollar industry.
And what would you say moving forward are the critical steps? I know we're coming up on time here. what would you say the critical next steps, and maybe we'll go to Larry and then Kyle and Christian. What's important? What's next kind of on this roadmap, in IoT blockchain, coming up in 2020, maybe next year, in a couple of years from now. But what are the critical steps that for our viewers to kind of learn and understand? We obviously know where we're at, where we came from, where we're at today. What's next?
Yeah, I'm gonna take the easy one here. I'm gonna say education, right? I think, all of us here are creating a brand new category of products, right? And with new categories and new technologies, it's not only about educating people about how the new technology works, but it's about educating people about what the problem is with how the world works today, right? And I think that's why blockchain is so powerful. It presents a brand new way of doing things, right? You don't have to follow the existing legacy kind of ways of doing things. And this is actually why I got into blockchain in the first place. I did a project with the World Economic Forum during my consulting days, and it was on financial inclusion in payments. And it wasn't necessarily a blockchain solution that really got me, but there's this product called M-Pesa, and it's a peer-to-peer mobile payment system in Kenya. And Kenya didn't even have a banking system that all their citizens could access. So they leapfrogged that and decided, hey, we don't have to follow the trend. We're going to do it our own way, right? And that's exactly what's going on in the blockchain space now. There's a lot of early adopters, a mix of speculators and true believers. Our goal as a platform, we're not trying to cater to everybody. We're just trying to, find those that really do believe, build that foundation. And, part of being a platform is being the broker between people that want to create these brand new types of privacy preserving IoT devices, as well as, finding the audience for them, right? So being the connector between builders and users. And it's all rooted in education. So that would be my answer for the next year or so.
Yeah, and to tee up on that, so education is a big part, but also as a user or as a builder, and more on the building side, take the time to understand if blockchain, using blockchain within your products is even necessary. You could spend a ton of time and money and resources on something that may not be applicable to you now or in the near future. At some point it may be, but take the time to figure out if it's actually something that applies to you. And if it is, then, further your education on which projects or which technologies, companies you should be working with as well. And, that's probably part one. So figure out if, on that education, figure out if you actually need it. Whether you're a corporate, you're an individual, or you're a startup looking to build, take your time. If you're looking to invest, do your research, do your diligence, and really, really look at where things are or are not. There can be a lot of hype, just like any industry, as to the greatest and when a new technology or new market exists that's going to solve everything and solve the world. There's a lot of big aspirations out there. Do your diligence and make sure that what's there is actual. And if it's a slightly different product, you understand what that slightly different angle is. And then third, interoperability. We need all of this to come together. So not only do we need to be educated, but we also need this to start working together on all levels. Infrastructure is getting there. Now we need to start connecting those dots left and right.
Cool. So communities, applications, and then I would say regulatory and like regulatory acceptance, regulatory understanding. There's the other day I had to go in someplace, even in the midst of COVID, and get a notary public to prove that it was me. Can we think of any way to do that better? That's just one tiny example where there's a lack of understanding on the part of our regulatory bodies and our institutions about that there's a way to prove identity outside of going and signing it in front of someone who has some certificate, right? And this is a big deal from the ground up, whether it's in IoT, whether it's in carbon markets, whatever it is. Helping our legislators, helping our institutions understand that there are solutions out there that are far superior and far more democratic and open and trustworthy than the models that we're currently using.
And to that point, acceptance and mindset. Accept the fact that things need to evolve and get more efficient, and have the mindset that this is going to be a long journey, and these pieces are going to come together as they come together.
Would you say adoption's here? I don't know what that looks like, whether that's enterprise, consumer, retail. Blockchain's here to stay. It's just obviously going to evolve, but it's the future. Are we all agreed on that?
Definitely. One saying I love is that if you need to replace something in your life, the alternative has to be 10 times better or 9 times better, whatever the saying is in Silicon Valley. But that's true. I mean, that's definitely subjective though, right? Like better depends on what you value, right? If you do value, your privacy, your data ownership. Today, a lot of people associate that with like money, right? Like, I could sell my data for thousands of dollars. Not necessarily true, because you have to replicate the ad marketplace that these guys pump your data into. But if you want to own your data, so you can train your own smart home to only react to data from you, so it's custom, personalized, and private. There's different benefits that I think will start to become more clear as time goes on. But it's really up to those early adopters, people that are watching this right now to lead the charge, be the adopters of these products, share the vision, and it's definitely a team effort. So.
And keyword, early adopters. We're not at mass adoption yet, and that's okay. That's okay. I mean, this technology is learning, it's growing, it's evolving. Doesn't need to be at mass adoption yet, but we're seeing more applications at the enterprise, where the enterprise is implementing it within their technology stack or within their applications, which are starting to trickle down to their user base, which then mass adoption comes very much easier, and the average day user won't have a clue, and that's okay. Again, it's just a piece of technology, it's a piece of infrastructure that helps things become more efficient to be powered, and you don't have to worry about that as the everyday user. So we're not there yet, but we're early days getting there.
Yeah, and we're notching our way there. I mean, if I just look at the amount of interest that our application has had over the past couple of years of our lifetime, how many different folks are reaching out, want to set up a call, want to understand how we're doing, how we're working, how we might integrate with them. I mean, it's clear that right now there's a lot more interest in this from an application side than there was a couple of years ago. Even though 2017 was the crypto year, it wasn't necessarily the blockchain application year.
That's what I was going to ask you, coming from the demand side. Obviously you ramped up now, you're ready to go out. There's a lot of demand out there for Regen Networks platform.
Yeah. I mean, the signs are good. Like I said, we're just our first credit from the application of our blockchain is coming out shortly. We already have pre-purchasers upline. A few technology companies want to purchase these credits, and yeah, from everything that I'm seeing, I'm confident that we're going to sell out this first round.
Awesome. No, happy to hear.
That represents, just to share, that represents 30,000 tons of carbon sequestered into the soil out of the atmosphere in this first round. So,
yeah, leading the charge. I remember talking to you and you telling me the story, so it's been great. I think we're up on time here. I appreciate the three of you for taking your time out of your day to come share your thoughts, opinions, what the future looks like, where we're at today. For all the viewers and listeners out there, thank you for tuning in. As you can tell, there's a lot of use cases for blockchain in general, a lot of verticals, a lot of industries. We just talked to two perfect examples here. Kyle's been in the space for so long with an array of use cases that he's touched on. So again, thank you three for joining me today. This is Reimagine 2020, and we look forward to talking again. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Adam.
Stay tuned to learn more about the state of blockchain education at major universities all around the world. Reimagine 2020.